Hey everybody, it is time to dive back into the Alien multiverse. I'm going to jump into talking about aliens today, but first I wanted to kind of just wrap up a few thoughts and correct a couple of thoughts that I had about the original Alien that I had in the last video. One thing is that I didn't really give Dan O'Bannon the credit that I should have. I still stand behind my opinion that Ridley Scott and H.R. Giger are the real visual aesthetic authors of that film, but O'Bannon really brought a lot to the table, and the themes that were definitely there in Giger's work, which is what O'Bannon identified with. He came up with those themes in the script, and one of the main things he wanted to do was to exploit male fear of rape and giving birth. And those elements of androgyny obviously were present in Giger's work and complemented the ideas that O'Bannon had perfectly. But O'Bannon really made that happen. And as an uncredited producer as well, he had a lot of invisible influence on the film, from just kind of culling together all of the conceptual artists who designed the spaceships, like Chris Foss and Ron Cobb and all these people that kind of were gathered together to work on the failed Jodorowsky version of Dune. O'Bannon brought all those people on board, including Giger, and they all serviced his ideas wonderfully. And O'Bannon was a pretty influential presence on set until they got sick of him and kicked him out, of course. But right down to just like superficial decisions, like when they molded the latex model of the facehugger, it was actually O'Bannon's decision to not paint it and leave it latex colored, which is still very fleshy looking, but not quite human, and it was the perfect decision. And little things like that, Dan O'Bannon had approval of. So mad props to him as an uncredited producer, in the same way that I give props to Walter Hill and David Giler as uncredited screenwriters. Fair enough? Cool. Also, there was a verbal warning that I forgot about. Greek chorus, Crazy Ralph style in the original Alien, of course. It was the fucking distress beacon. They think it's a distress call at first, and they find out later that it's a warning. So yeah, that beacon basically is saying, you're all doomed. And finally, my final thoughts on the xenomorph and what make it so fucking scary, most particularly in this film, is that, as I mentioned in the previous video, the xenomorph's life cycle, every aspect of it, including its sexual and reproductive life cycle, it's violent and destructive and fatal. And also, because of the way that it reproduces, basically every creature that is not one of its own kind is potentially female. And that is the real essence of horror at the primal fucking basement level of this film. That's what it is. And I don't remember if Alien was mentioned at all in Carol Clover's book, Men, Women, and Chainsaws. But it's a fantastic book, and you should totally read it if you hadn't. And one of her most interesting points is that these slasher films in the 80s, which were thought to be, sexist at best and misogynist at worst, and I'm not going to argue that they weren't, but either unconsciously or accidentally, her hypothesis is that these films were teaching the young male demographic that they were geared towards to identify with females, with female characters and female fears. And that was a very conscious fear that O'Bannon chose to exploit for Alien, which is, again, why I have to call Alien a slasher movie at the end of the day. And what that does for the human cast is it levels the playing field. There's no room for gender politics, because they're all female at this point. And when gender power politics are taken away from the ensemble human cast, it is the human female who ends up triumphing in the end, which I think is also a really interesting idea, and worth looking at maybe a little closer. Okay, on to Aliens. Now, when I design these charts, I hope it's kind of obvious, but I will usually have like a linear, straight down progression if I feel like the films exist in the same timeline, and there's a split if they don't. Most fans of Aliens consider it to be the only true sequel, the only other film that's canon, and I understand and respect their opinion. Some of these people also believe that Aliens is equal to, if not superior to, the original, and I have no respect for that opinion whatsoever. I can't abide by it. But for me personally, subjectively, I will admit it. I'll allow room for debate, but for me, there is a split. This does exist in a different universe than the original Alien. That's why I've been stressing that so much, that I believe that Scott and Giger were the authors of this universe, basically. Cameron came along and, was a very forceful personality in his own right, a bit of an egomaniac, and wanted to put his own stamp on the film. So that was informing a lot of it. There were some just superficial decisions that he made that kind of fucked with the visual universe of the movie in a way that I found that took me out of it. One of them was not working in anamorphic. It's the one film in the first 4 that doesn't do so. He shot in Super 35 because he thought anamorphic was a pain in the ass. And I'm sure it was, but it's fucking worth it. It's a beautiful, beautiful format. And that's really, at the end of the day, what defines Alien and its universe, in my humble opinion, to a T, which is the handsomeness of Ridley Scott's photography combined with the beautiful, grotesque savagery of H.R. Giger's visual universe. Those two things together define the experience of this movie for me, and it's what I want to see continue in the franchise. And no, I did not get that at all. So, yeah, we go to Super 35 and a 185 aspect ratio. He also took the skull domes off of the Xenomorphs' head design because, again, it was a pain in the ass to work with. And just, God, fuck you. How lazy can you be? I thought you were... Anyway. And also, in general, I know the situation has changed. The original ensemble in Alien didn't have weapons to work with, and this group does. But it just feels to me like a lot of the threat and menace and mystique is taken out of the Xenomorphs in this film. They have to play drones and second fiddle to the Queen alien, which, while I will admit is an amazing, amazing design, I think Stan Winston fucking pulled off something wonderful, one of the coolest creature designs ever. I can't call the monster herself a better monster than the original Xenomorph. I think my friend Jeff Dean would argue with that. I believe the Queen is his all-time favorite monster. I support him with that. But much like the Bride of Frankenstein, one wouldn't exist without the other. So I have to give it to the Xenomorph at the end of the day, as being the granddaddy of all movie monsters. The Queen is cool, but it's also kind of a cheat and kind of a cheapening of, again, the exoticism that was given to this species by O'Bannon and Giger. It is so mysterious. And the original life cycle, which was in a deleted scene, of course, was the victims get cocooned and transformed into eggs. Some of them do, anyway. I assume some just get eaten. And that's how the cycle continues. In this one, we have a queen. And we basically have a queen so that, the hero can have, like a big boss to fist fight at the end. Just like every other fucking 80s action movie. And like every other video game that's ever come along since then. I just find it very generic and shallower, I feel like Alien, because of its horror elements, had a depth to it, that really made it stand out and has allowed it to last to this day. And Aliens has an action movie cheapness to it, including a very conservative mindset. Again, a lot of this is in the commentary for Aliens, but there's an anecdote where he talks about how in his mind, Ripley was always going back for revenge. In Sigourney Weaver's mind, this is like, you know, the classic like conservative and liberal, the two most powerful, influential people on this film, kind of butting heads philosophically over what the film is about and what the themes are. For Cameron, it was revenge, which basically means that he's rewriting a script that he's already written for Rambo First Blood Part 2, or at least contributed to, and turned this beautiful, fucking majestic, horrifying, grotesque, fascinating, endlessly, timelessly fascinating horror film into another generic 80s shoot-'em-up Vietnam revenge fantasy. Fuck you. And their arguments went on to, like, Ripley didn't, or Sigourney, I keep doing that, don't I, with these fucking Jamie Lee Curtis and Sigourney. I apologize, bottom of my heart. Sigourney, I had a problem with her character using guns, and Cameron, of course, was very insistent about that. And they went out, he took her out for target practice, and she fired her first round of machine gun bullets, turned to Cameron and said, "This is fun." And in his head, he chuckled to himself, "Ha, another liberal bites the dust." Which, again, fuck you. Yeah, sorry. So, yeah, and you know, and interestingly, I also, we'll talk about this in the other films, but Sigourney didn't get her way all the way through, but I think just in the way that she approached her performance, which was not that Ripley was going back for revenge, but to make sure that nobody else got killed. You know, she was looking to save lives, not to destroy. She was looking to preserve. That's the nature of Ripley's character. And just because of her expressiveness and the majesty that she brought to this character, the nobility that she brought to this character, I think that's what shines through at the end of the day. You know, is Ripley's goodness and not her vengefulness. That is to her credit, and it is also to her credit. I believe this is the first time that a woman in a lead role in the film was paid $1 million. So we're seeing this anima empowerment, which happened in the first film, start to manifest in real life, which I just find endlessly, endlessly fascinating. It's the most interesting thing about Aliens. I'm not on board. I'm not on board with the military characters. I'm not on board with bringing a cute kid into this picture. You know, again, because I believe that Alien is ultimately a sexual horror film, and this universe, it's all tied into sexuality in some way or another. You can branch out and explore creative, you know, variations on the theme, but that's the theme to me. That's what these films should be about, and kids don't belong in this universe. You know, you kind of have to dumb it down as much as Cameron did in order to make, you know, this little kid getting fucking kidnapped by the xenomorphs, whom we've known previously to be these viciously sexual creatures, to make that palatable at all. Okay, moving on. What else do I have to talk about here? Also, you know, like, I have qualms with the structure of the film, particularly with the third act. I believe it is the exact same climax as the original Alien. You know, she has to go back into the bowels of this man-made structure that's been taken over by the xenomorph in order to retrieve, you know, a smaller creature. It's the cat in the original and a kid in Aliens, and hissing steam and fucking spinning flashing lights and female voices counting down self-destruct sequences. She gets away in the nick of time, and so does the alien, and they have to have a final confrontation, and she blasts it out into space. It's the exact same fucking climax. So, on one level, too different. On one level, too much the same. And let's see, what else have I got here? Yeah, the removal of the sexual element. Ultimately, a betrayal of Giger's work. He went on record in an interview with Fangoria as saying that he and his team wanted to be faithful to Giger's work without being slaves to it. And I have to argue that point. I have to say, no, you should be slaves to it. You should be slaves to Giger's work. He invented this universe. And I'm going to stop there. I think I can get through the rest of these in one fell swoop. So part 3 will be out the rest of them, I think, probably. And that will happen maybe later today, maybe tomorrow, maybe in 2 weeks. Lord knows if anything has been proven, it's that I can't be trusted with deadlines. See you next time.